Welcome back to America's Retirement Headquarters, home of the Retirement Guys formula and America's Medicare Associates with Nolan Baker and Chaz Price. ARHQ.com is the website. The phone number is 419-794-3030. If you were to inherit money, how long can you make it last? Research shows that whether you were getting $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, the money would probably be gone within 2 to 4 years. And one study shows that when someone inherits money, they will buy a new car within 19 days. So, we talk about getting to, through, and beyond retirement. How can you help make an inheritance last much longer?
Well, that's surprising when you look at the statistics that are out there. The money, no matter the dollar amount's gone within, 2 to 4 years. And I think about, what it took for that person who left the inheritance, how long it took to generate, the savings that was able to be left behind. It's typically, a lifetime of savings and accumulated to get things to be passed on to the next generation. We've got 4 simple tips that I would give you on, trying to make that inheritance last a little bit longer, to make a lasting impact on you and your family. And number 1 is, start by creating a financial plan. So what we do here at our firm is we create what's called the Retirement Team Action Plan. We work with a lot of clients. We work with many different people that are multi-generational. In fact, I can think of several families where we work with 3, 4, even in one case up to 5 generations of families, helping make those financial decisions, getting them involved in that overall planning process, and going through the Retirement Team Action Plan helps you to start by creating your overall financial plan. So looking at your financial plan, it's going to allow you to consider, what is unique about your situation? What are some of the short-term things? What are some of the longer-term things? What are the pros and cons of each of those decisions that you make? Number 2 is you want to consider some of the tax implications that what you have when you're receiving those inheritance dollars. As an example, things like real estate or non-retirement accounts are typically going to be taxed different than if you're inheriting an annuity, or if you're inheriting an IRA or a 401k. And so the decisions on what you do with that IRA, whether you take a lump sum distribution, or you take an inherited stretch out over say up to 10 years, those type of things are going to impact your tax returns. It's going to impact how much ultimately the IRS gets and how much that you keep. That's why, again, when you're looking at the team, that's what we do here. In the team approach, we're looking at taxes, estate planning, asset protection, and money management. We also think it's important that you have a team in place that's putting things together. So, one, we're going to give you that advice from the financial perspective, but we have the ability where we can pull in and work with your accountant, your CPA, and or make recommendations. We're going to help work with your attorney, whether that's the person settling the estate or whether it's looking at maybe getting your estate updated. We're going to help pull in those key professionals to help you make a sound financial plan. And again, one example is considering those tax implications. Number 3 is the article talks a little bit about paying off high interest debt. I would say conceptually, I really agree with that. I think, when you look at the credit card debt that's out there today, it's a really good idea to work towards eliminating the credit card debt. The only thing I would say is once you pay off the credit card debt, what I want you to do is chop up that credit card and cancel it and be done with it. I only keep one credit card. I have an airline credit card, and it gets me free bags, and I use it for all of my purchases because I get mileage on it, but then I pay it off every month because, these credit card rates back up in the 20% range. If you have a lot of money on credit cards, it begins to be a disaster. My other experiences in the past, it's people who use credit cards and have multiple credit cards, even those that pay them off end up charging them back up. So it's a good idea that if you're going to pay off that high interest debt, you've got to change your lifestyle a little bit. You've got to get it out of that revolving credit card debt use. And the best way to do it is close them, chop them up, and again, pay them off every single month. So that's the number 4 tip that I would do, is avoid those lifestyle splurges. The example here is that somebody buys a new car, and the average in the study was 19 days later. Nicer clothing, newer watch, that hot investment tip from the brother-in-law or the friend at the lake, those oftentimes can go south, and voila, in a short amount of time, you're out of the inheritance. So take a breather, sit down, work on developing a financial plan before you make any of those decisions and fill out the paperwork.
Nolan, I was kind of looking at this from a multi-generational standpoint of your kids potentially inheriting wealth, and actually, I use that as a kind of a divisor there, where to say it's different between being rich and being wealthy. Wealth gets passed down to future generations, and so I think isn't there like a saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations or less generally? Which is kind of the concept that studies show about 90% of wealth earned in a family is generally lost by the end of the 3rd generation. And it happens for a number of reasons. Could be poor financial decisions, could be just a lack of education or an inflated lifestyle. But one of the concepts that came to mind, you touched on it a little bit with estate planning and obviously working with your attorneys and your trusted legal professionals, is a trust. By placing, in some cases, inherited funds, making the trust the beneficiary instead of maybe a person, that could significantly, and making sure it was structured correctly, could really protect those assets, for the future, reducing, some of that behavior you talked about with spendthrift, where maybe you don't want your child to inherit, $100,000 because they'll blow it. We all know our kids. I got one in mind. I know who would. I know who would save it. But spendthrift behavior can be pretty much all but eliminated in a trust by having the ability to document and say exactly how you want those assets to be distributed. The other thought that came to mind when it comes to protection a trust can offer would be shielding from bankruptcy or even shielding from divorce. So one way to ensure that an inheritance lasts is obviously not to lose half of it. And trust can help protect inherited assets from being divided in a divorce settlement. Since they're owned by at that point by a trust and not by an individual, they may not generally be considered marital property. And then obviously bankruptcy, if you're facing financial difficulties when you inherit that money, it can be included in your bankruptcy proceedings, and attachments can be added by your creditor. So I think there's a lot that can be done with trust planning. Also, Nolan, one of the things that we really help our clients do, and I think that can significantly improve the longevity of your assets, is some really thorough tax planning. Going through the concept of, does it make sense to pay tax now or later? Because we've talked about it on the show that we pay taxes in chunks. And when you pass away, your beneficiaries inherit your assets and whatever the tax bracket is at that time. Now, they have some time to stretch out those payments, but at some point, Uncle Sam's going to come knocking and he's going to want his 20 to 30%. Well, if that actual tax rate is 40 to 50 by the time you leave these assets to your beneficiaries, would it make sense to pay tax now? Does it make sense to pay more tax now and save the tax impact on future generations? And as part of one of the modules in our financial plan, we can actually tell you, based on a 95% probability, that one way or the other, in which way do you leave more money to your beneficiaries? Is it you paying the tax or them? And if that gives you, that would definitely give you some insight in terms of tax planning that can be done to help extend your the assets that you leave to your next generation.
It definitely sounds like, 2 different ways to take a look at it. One is looking at it from somebody that's receiving an inheritance and, navigating that, to mom and dad and the parents figuring out, how to set it up correctly to try to look at it from a multi-generational perspective. And I guess the final thought in this segment is, the ultimate estate planning checklist is one of those items that we make available to our viewers and listeners. That ultimate estate planning checklist can help you kind of walk through the ideas that Chaz and I were sharing with you, and we'd be more than happy to get you a copy of that.
All you need to do to obtain that is reach out to the team. ARHQ.com is the website. You can give a call as well, 419-794-3030, whether you have yourself come into an inheritance or you are thinking about it as far as, generationally, and perhaps there are those in your family who might need a little bit of protection from themselves or protection from the IRS or what have you, making sure that it is, passed on in the way that you want it to be, and not necessarily, maybe spent down in a record amount of time. That ultimate estate planning checklist, as I mentioned, available to you. Just give a call, 419-794-3030, or go to the website, schedule a time, and receive a copy of that checklist as well, arhq.com.